In this episode, you'll discover why anxiety, panic, and rumination are so common after a life-altering diagnosis and how to gently reduce them so that you can breathe again. Welcome back to Renegade Remission. If a diagnosis has left your mind spinning with worst-case scenarios, waking you up at night in a panic, or trapping you in endless what-if thoughts, this episode will help you understand why your brain is reacting this way and how to gently calm the fear so that you can breathe and sleep again. By the end of this episode, you will understand why anxiety, panic, and rumination often intensify after a diagnosis, how the brain and body create these fear responses, and what practical strategies survivors use to interrupt fear spirals and regain emotional steadiness. I'll walk you through several simple but powerful emotional regulation tools that many people use when navigating illness and uncertainty. When someone receives a life-changing diagnosis, one of the most immediate and overwhelming responses is anxiety. Many people describe their minds suddenly filling with worst-case scenarios, their bodies feeling constantly tense, and their thoughts circling endlessly around questions they cannot answer. If this has happened to you, it does not mean you are weak, dramatic, or failing to cope well enough. In many ways, it is exactly how the human nervous system is designed to respond when something threatens safety, identity, and future all at once. A diagnosis can disrupt the mental map people rely on to understand their lives. Plans that once felt stable suddenly feel uncertain. The body, which may have once felt predictable, now feels unfamiliar. Daily routines change, medical decisions appear, and the future can feel frighteningly open-ended. In this environment, the brain's threat detection systems activate strongly. The mind begins searching for answers, scanning constantly for danger, and rehearsing possible outcomes in an attempt to regain control. These processes often show up as anxiety, panic attacks, and persistent rumination. Although these reactions can feel overwhelming, many people eventually learn ways to steady their minds again. They discover tools that help calm the nervous system, interrupt spiraling thoughts, and make room for moments of emotional balance even while navigating illness. Before we explore the science behind these reactions, let's begin with a real survivor story. When historian Kate Bowler was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer in her 30s, the news arrived in the middle of what had seemed like a stable and promising future. She was a young professor, newly married, and raising a small child. Her life had felt open and expansive. The diagnosis abruptly altered that sense of certainty. In her memoir, Bowler describes the intense fear that followed. Questions about survival, treatment outcomes, and the future of her family began filling her thoughts. Medical appointments and test results became emotionally charged moments that could send her mind racing with possibilities she could not control. She writes in her memoir about how difficult it was to quiet her thoughts, particularly at night when there were fewer distractions. At this time, her mind would revisit the same frightening questions repeatedly, searching for reassurance that often could not be found. Over time, Bowler began to develop a different relationship with uncertainty. Through conversations with friends, moments of humor, and reflections on what still mattered in her daily life, she gradually learned that peace did not require perfect answers about the future. Her treatment continued and the uncertainty remained, but her ability to live alongside that uncertainty slowly grew. Rather than attempting to eliminate every fearful thought, she began focusing more intentionally on the relationships, conversations, and moments of meaning that were still present in her life. Her experience reflects something many people discover after diagnosis. The fear itself may not disappear entirely, but the way the mind relates to that fear can change. Over time, many people learn to calm their nervous system, interrupt catastrophic thinking, and find steadier emotional ground again. Now let's get into the science behind why anxiety and rumination increase after diagnosis. A life-changing diagnosis activates multiple biological systems at once. The brain, the hormonal stress response, the immune system, and psychological coping processes all interact in ways that can amplify anxiety. One major contributor is the brain's threat detection circuitry. The amygdala, which is a structure involved in identifying potential danger, becomes more active when a person perceives a serious threat. Research on emotional processing shows that heightened threat perception can increase vigilance and worry while reducing the brain's ability to calm itself through rational evaluation. This is why fear after diagnosis often feels automatic rather than voluntary. Stress hormones also play an important role. When the brain detects threat, it activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, releasing hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones increase heart rate, heighten alertness, and prepare the body to respond to danger. While these responses are important and protective in short bursts, prolonged activation of them can contribute to physical symptoms of anxiety, such as rapid heartbeat, restlessness, sleep disruption, and difficulty concentrating. Uncertainty itself is another powerful driver of anxiety. Neuroscience research shows that the human brain finds uncertainty particularly stressful because it prevents the brain from predicting what will happen next. When the future feels unpredictable, the mind often attempts to regain control by imagining many possible scenarios. This process can quickly turn into rumination, where the same thoughts repeat without producing clear solutions. Inflammation may also contribute to emotional distress during illness. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology have found associations between inflammatory signaling and mood changes, including increased anxiety and depressive symptoms. These effects appear to occur because immune activity can influence neurotransmitter systems and brain regions involved in emotional regulation. Taken together, these biological processes help explain why anxiety after diagnosis can feel so intense and so persistent. The brain is attempting to protect the body from danger, but in situations where the threat cannot be immediately resolved, the system can remain stuck in this heightened state of vigilance. Now let's move into some practical tools for calming anxiety and rumination. Although anxiety after diagnosis is common, there are ways to help the nervous system settle and reduce the intensity of fear responses. One of the most effective strategies is regulating the body's breathing. Slow breathing patterns that emphasize a longer exhale can help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the stress response. A simple pattern involves inhaling for 4 seconds and exhaling for 6 to 8 seconds for several cycles. Many people find that this gradually slows their heart rate and reduces the physical sensations of panic. Another helpful technique involves labeling emotions directly. Research in effective neuroscience shows that when people put their feelings into words, for example, saying, "I am feeling afraid right now," activity in emotional brain centers can decrease, while regulatory brain regions become more active. This simple act of naming an emotion can create a psychological distance from the feeling of it. Grounding techniques can also interrupt rumination. A common method involves bringing attention to the present environment by identifying a few things you can see, feel, hear, taste, or smell. Redirecting attention towards sensory experience can help interrupt repetitive fear-based thinking and anchor the mind in the current moment. Preparing for anxiety in advance can also be helpful. Some people find it useful to create a plan for moments when panic arises. This might include listening to calming music, using a breathing exercise, writing briefly in a journal, or repeating a reassuring phrase that reminds them that they are safe. Finally, reconnecting with sources of meaning can help rebalance the mind. When anxiety narrows attention towards worst-case outcomes, intentionally focusing on relationships, values, purpose, or meaningful experiences can help broaden emotional perspective and restore a sense of psychological stability. If anxiety and rumination have intensified for you after your diagnosis, it does not mean you are coping poorly or that something is wrong with your mind. These reactions are simply the nervous system's attempt to respond to uncertainty, danger, and profound life change. The encouraging news is that the brain is totally adaptable. With practice, supportive relationships, and tools that calm the nervous system, many people learn to reduce the intensity of fear responses and develop a steadier emotional rhythm again. Moments of steadiness often return gradually through breath, connection, meaning, and small practices that help the nervous system remember that not every moment is a crisis. Learning to create those moments of safety can make the path through illness feel more manageable, one day at a time. In our upcoming episodes, we'll continue discussing strategies to reverse disease, so stay tuned for those episodes, and as always, go be renegades.